Hello there, and welcome to another episode of The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring podcast with your host, Gideon. That's me. I hope you're doing well and that you can enjoy my rambling about this masterpiece from 25 years ago while you do whatever it is you're doing. As always, I will analyze 5 minutes of the film and talk about things one might not immediately notice or make connections to other things regarding the lore of the world of Tolkien. Fun facts of obscure details and movie production things such as forced perspective and massive miniatures called bigatures. Now let's get back to Frodo and Sam and the gossip hobbits of the Green Dragon on this episode, number 8. We begin at minute 35 with Sam shyly looking away and end at minute 40 with a man having his mouth wide open and holding a lantern. Oh my god, whoever could that be? Did he see my search history? Oh, we must find out together. We continue where we left off at the table with Sam, his father, the old gaffer, and the two gossip queens, Ted, Sandyman, and Old Noakes. Ted replies to Gaffer, regarding that the mountains are teeming with goblins, that those are just far-off tales and children's stories, and that he begins to sound like the old Bilbo Baggins. Though respected, Bilbo does seem to have the odd one reputation. I get that one as well, don't worry Bilbo, you're in good company. Which makes sense, given that he up and vanished one day and people simply assumed him dead after a while. However, when he then reappeared, richer than ever, and much more aloof than before, many were puzzled, and some even furious. I'm looking at you, Lobella. Fun fact. In the first version of the chapter, Long Expected Party, Tolkien wrote something interesting regarding weddings. Apparently, hobbits would keep it very much a secret who they were going to marry, and then one day would suddenly disappear for a week, or two with their significant other, maybe even longer if you know what I'm saying. And when they return, they'd be married. So the hobbits simply eloped all the time. Understandable, if you not like to make a fuss. So that's what the hobbits originally believed. Bilbo got married and that's why he had disappeared. And when he came back and wasn't married and did the very un-hobbit-like thing of going on an adventure just because, they were more than confused. Honestly, me too, because if this was a hobbit tradition, I would have taken Thorin Oakenshield and married him on the spot.
Oh yes, I do.
But again, it shows that Bilbo was kind of an outsider. Sure, he was social and pleasant, but that doesn't mean you'd make deep connections when you're internally just very different. Ted adds that Bilbo was cracked, which is another way of saying crazy or being an odd job. Thanks, Ted. I'm sure you too were invited to his birthday party and enjoyed all the booze and food and weed over there. Nice of you to say that, Ted. Gaffer turns around and says that Frodo here is cracking too, but he says it much more fondly and very much in a positive way. Frodo comes around the table, 4 drinks in his hand, and he puts them onto the table. I am proud of it, he says, and shoves the drinks to the other hobbits. Seems like Frodo is used to all that gossip about him and his uncle, which, if you think about it, makes sense. Ever since his existence, Bilbo had been pretty famous for going on the adventure with the dwarves. Bilbo was 51 years old when he left the Shire with the dwarves. I can't blame Bilbo for going, honestly.
Take me with you!
That's middle age for a hobbit. Not young, but also not an old man. And when Frodo was born, Bilbo was around 78 years old, and pretty shortly after he adopted Frodo due to his parents dying. So Frodo grew up always treated as the adopted son of basically a celebrity. I would be immune to Ted's cracked comment too if I had heard it all my life. As the hobbits take their drinks, Ted continues that it shouldn't concern them what happens beyond their borders. He then turns to Frodo and says, keep out of trouble, and trouble will not find you. Frodo gives him a smile that says, oh yeah, sure, try that. Which is hilarious, because Bilbo himself never went out looking for trouble, but it found him in the form of Gandalf, who recruited him anyway for the adventure with the dwarfs. I would look like that too, a knowing smile towards someone who is less worldly. Let's put it nicely, he's a little less worldly, this Ted, isn't he? Frodo takes another sip from his drink, and we cut to him and Sam leaving the Green Dragon with a very nice echoey melody of the Shire theme in the background. I already mentioned before that Frodo wears a nice brown jacket, but I never really noticed Sam's outfit, in quotes. But now seeing them next to each other, I really like what they've done here. Remember, Frodo is pretty wealthy, and Sam is just a gardener, so he would have far less money compared to a Baggins. Therefore, it makes sense that his clothes would be much simpler and cheaper in material. While Frodo's vest is of a nice brown and well-kept and seemingly new, Sam's vest is grey and thick and probably worn by the old gaffer before him. Maybe he uses that one even for work. Sam's shirt is also more unkempt compared to Frodo's. As a gardener, I wouldn't really care either if my shirt was decent or well kept during a night out with friends. You're here to relax, to wind down, to be at ease, and not tied up in, constricting clothes. Frodo, in comparison, looks almost fashionable. And what the fuck do I see there in the background? We hear someone call Rosie a sweet maiden, and it's none other than Sandyman. Don't you dare lay your gossip-riddled hands onto this precious flower. Seize him! I demand to seize him! Both Frodo and Sam turn around to witness this tomfoolery, and when they turn away again, Sam suggests that Ted better mind who he sweet-talks to. Hell yeah! I hold him for you, Sam. I hold him for you. Get his gossip ass. Frodo tries to comfort Sam by saying, don't worry, Rosie knows an idiot when she sees one. But that does more harm than it does good, because Sam instantly assumes that Rosie thinks him an idiot, because he doesn't really think highly of himself. Just look at that face, riddled with insecurity. I could squish those cheeks like a nan would with her grandson. Sam, you may be dense, but you're not an idiot. We cut to the outside of Frodo's home, and both Sam and Frodo are on the road, right at the garden gate. Some time has clearly passed since the party and Bilbo's departure, because the sign of the party earlier in the film has been removed. Fun fact, in the movie the timeline is a bit ambiguous, but one can assume that at least a few weeks have passed since the party of Bilbo's birthday. Because it is still summer, it looks very warm, and at least I think it is because the hobbits are walking around like they did during Bilbo's party. Anyway, in the books it was more so, 17 years. Over 1.5 decades, it took Gandalf 17 years to go to Minas Tirith, read old and dusty scrolls and come back? No, of course not, don't be silly. He did much more in that time. But more to that later. Now, in the moonlight, we properly see how small the hobbits really are. They just about reach above the gate fully grown. And it's not because the set was built massive, but simply due to the actors. It's two of the size doubles for Elijah and Sean. Kiran Shah for Elijah, who we have seen before in this film, and Bhasker Patel for Sean, aka Sam. Fun fact, apparently Bhasker Patel and Viggo Mortensen, the actor who played Aragorn, had a very special relationship on set. Bhasker often shouted at Viggo like a mom, commanding him to go places and bring him stuff and so on. Or when Viggo caught a fish they then later cooked for dinner, it was apparently like a busy restaurant in the kitchen, with Bhasker giving orders on what to do and how to do it. Just the image in my head is hilarious of this short man commanding this very tall man, and Viggo being this quiet and accommodating figure, just obeying like a good child. I would have loved to see it in real life, not going to lie. Frodo and Sam say their goodbyes, and Frodo opens the gate, and we quickly shift viewpoints. We are peeking through something. It's too dark to really make out what it is, but from where we are, I would say it's the window, but we are looking through the window as someone. Oh. Who is this? Who are we right now? The music slowly creeps in, and it feels like something is stalking Frodo, who is none the wiser and just leisurely goes up the stairs to his home. We cut to the inside of the Hobbit hole, and it's completely dark. Only the moonlight from outside is illuminating the place. But there is one more source of light. One. There, almost in the center of the screen, there is a candle mounted to the wall. Burning. Frodo, did you leave a candle burning in your house made of wood, Frodo? Frodo, are you truly the nephew of your uncle and a fire hazard for your own well-being and all the wonderful old books in your home, Frodo? Who leaves a candle burning when you go out of the house? It's just common sense. A chimney I sort of understand because that is built to burn for long stretches at a time, and you can leave it unsupervised because it's within stone, so I get that. But a candle right below wood? Hobbits. We hear some rustling and Frodo looks to his left and a piece of paper flies through the air. There is a wind going through the place because a window has been left open. And at first I thought, well, Frodo might have left it open, but given how he reacts to it, I don't think so. He looks quite surprised. There also seems to be a certain amount of chaos with the papers there. It looks like someone had been rummaging through his things. A thief? An intruder? Who could it be? He walks around carefully and with an expression of suspicion. The wood beneath him croaks and moans like he weighs a ton, and we peer around the Hobbit and look into the dark corridor of his home over his shoulder. This is getting creepy, and the movie amps it up a notch by giving us this close-up shot of Frodo's face with the darkness right behind him. But the darkness doesn't stay for long, because a massive hand emerges from the blackness and grabs onto Frodo's shoulder, turns him around, and Gandalf steps out of the shadows, looking disheveled and out of breath. The camera is put right up into his face and he asks, "Is it secret? Is it safe?" Goodness, I would have pissed myself. Frodo might have, given how much he drank that night. Okay, so it was Gandalf who left the window open, I assume. But why? If he was looking for the envelope containing the ring, wouldn't it make more sense to keep everything shut? Gandalf knows that Sauron is looking for the ring and that Sauron knows where it might be, given that he has Gollum, which we'll learn later. So, with all that in mind, would it make sense to keep things a little more on the wrap? I know a pretty glass window will do very little against orcs and Nazgul, but hey, it's a thought that counts, no? Anyway, we cut to Frodo opening a wooden box and it's actually bright again. So in between this scene and the creepy old man Gandalf whisper questions scene, they had time to light up the place with fire and candles. Good. I'm glad Gandalf was willing to wait for that at least, because looking for paper in the absolute dark is absolute hell. Frodo pulls out some scrolls and puts them next to the chest. We are in a hallway, probably around the corner. We have a small dresser on the left with a candle and a pot with flowers. It's a mix of purple, green and pink. The purple might be some more lavender, because we've seen some in the gardens before. But the green and the pink one, I can't really figure out. It reminds me of the spotted knapweed, a flower in which the base is green and sprouts into a fizzy pink top. But that, as the name suggests, is a weed, and an annoying one at that. It spreads super fast, increases soil erosion and wildfire risk. I highly doubt that the Gamgees would allow such a weed to fester in the gardens they tend. They wouldn't allow that in any soil in the Shire if they can't help it. So no, it can't be spotted knapweed, or at least I don't believe it is. Maybe I'll find a better angle at some point, but for now let's call it the green-pink fuzzy top plant. TM. A sudden noise of some sort of animal, it sounds like a squished pig, makes Gandalf turn around frantically and points his staff in the general direction of the sound. What are you going to do, Gandalf? Are you going to cast a fireball through the window and destroy half his house? I mean, to be fair, Frodo is also a fire hazard similar to Bilbo. If it would go up in flames, nobody would be surprised. I like a small detail about this scene, and it's easy to miss. Frodo, who knows nothing of the potential danger and darkness that is approaching, is bathed in warm and comfortable light, blessed in unknowing. Gandalf, in comparison, is still in this blue and cold light from before, when he came out of the darkness, because he knows of the dangers that are coming towards the Shire, and to Frodo. I am not sure if it was meant like that, but it lends itself well. Gandalf is itchy and almost paranoid looking, and therefore has the cold moonlight on him, and Frodo is calm and pretty relaxed and is shown in warm and golden light, like if you were sitting at a fireplace. Frodo exclaims calmly, a simple, "Ah!" to let Gandalf know he's found what they've been looking for, and he hands the wizard the envelope. In one quick motion, Gandalf pulls it out of Frodo's hand and immediately throws it into the fire of the fireplace. Wow, okay Gandalf, there's no time to be wasted. I like a man that takes initiative. Rightfully so, Frodo asks what he is doing, but the wizard doesn't reply, and we see how the envelope begins to burn and the wax seals sizzle with heat. Fun fact! In the books, Frodo reacts a bit more to Gandalf throwing the ring into the fireplace. He immediately goes for the prongs and tries to take it out, but Gandalf stops him because he wants to wait until the markings show, or at least wait a little more than a few seconds to prove his theory either right or wrong. This moment in another adaptation, the movie made by Ralph Bakshi, they turned around to the influence of the ring. Gandalf would stop Frodo, who tried to get the ring out of the fire, and ask if the ring had such a hold on him already. And sure, one could interpret it as such, I have no problem with it, but I don't think the ring had any major influence on Frodo at this point in time. Also, can we just agree how over the top the entire movie by Bakshi was? The rotoscoping fails, the facial expressions no normal person would ever do, the frozen eyes, just everything about this production is quite something, I tell you that much. Interesting, like some things are really cool and well done, but most of it is just a big what? Maybe I make one episode just about the Bakshi movie. Huh. That's an idea. Maybe. Just maybe. Anyway, the movie here seems to agree with me regarding the ring's influence, because except for his question and confusion, that is it. Frodo doesn't try to get the ring out or become furious with Gandalf in any way. Slowly we see the parchment burn away and give free the ring, which lays unbothered and unblemished in the embers of the fire. And I wondered, hang on a minute, the One Ring surely is immune to everything except the fires of doom, but the real-life ring, you know, the one made for the films, the one we see here, made by human hands and not immortal evil dark lords, that one was made with gold. But gold is a soft metal and can melt, if I recall correctly, unless that fireplace is not hot enough. to the internet machine.
Na 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 na.
The ring was made with 18 karat gold, okay, and 18 karat gold melts within 900 to 950 degrees Celsius. But an open fireplace like this could only reach around 600 degrees Celsius, and that's why we see no harm done to the ring. Well, the replica, the thing, the real, you know what I mean, this thing. That's why we don't see any damages on this thing, because it's not hot enough. The fireplace is simply too cool to make the gold begin its process of melting. Gandalf, ready with a prong, reaches for the ring in the fireplace. Frodo, behind him, with an understandable expression of what is going on and are you okay, old man? I would look like that too. The prong gets the ring and some of the burned parchment, and when we cut back to Gandalf, we see the ring held tightly in the prong as he studies it closer. One would think that such an item of great power would have an aura, or some sort of energy exuding from it, so that would make it much easier for someone like Gandalf to notice and recognize it, no? So why is its presence alone not enough? Late in the movie it's obvious that more spiritual people like Gandalf, Galadriel and so on can sense the ring's power. For them it makes especially sense since they are both bearers of the elven rings of power. But the One Ring is also kind of sentient and probably doesn't want to be found by Gandalf especially, so maybe it's suppressing its nature and power to not be detected? But then again, if it's sentient enough to do that, why would it show the writing a few moments later? Spoilers, by the way. That is a dead giveaway of what it truly is. Is it a more physical reaction the ring simply cannot control? How much can the ring control? I mean, it left Gollum, whatever that means, at the start of the film, but how did it do that exactly? We know it can alter its weight, but okay. Does it sneeze when left in dust? Does it feel itchy when it's on a rough cloth? In that sense, it would have felt always itchy being held by Gollum. While these questions itch my brain and cause me lack of sleep, Gandalf gets Frodo to open up his hand for the ring. To which the Hobbit rightly reacts with a look of, what the fuck, this was in the fire, this is gonna be hot as shit, I will not touch that. But Gandalf reassures him that it's quite cool, and then quickly drops the ring in Frodo's palm. Frodo's hand dips down for a moment, expecting the ring to be hot. I would too. The wisest and greyest man alive could come by and tell me it's not hot when it was literally in the fire a few seconds ago. My brain will still try to protect me from harm and make me drop the potential scorching object. But Gandalf's words are true, and after initial shock and a moment of gasp, Frodo's expression settles on slight bewilderment. The wizard then asks what Frodo can see, to which he replies, nothing, there's nothing, as he turns the ring around in his hand, as we get a beautiful close-up shot for the One Ring, with the fireplace in the background flickering around. We follow Gandalf a little as he steps away and gives off a sigh of relief, as his worst predictions have been false. Hang on, Gandalf, everything will fall apart soon and in time. But before that, I have to talk one more time about the portraits right behind him. It is the two portraits of Bilbo's parents, which we've seen before in this film. This is nothing new. I've talked about who these characters are, yes, but never really who portrayed them. Portrayed the portrait. I understand, I'm hilarious. Belladonna Took and Bungo Baggins were portrayed by Fran Walsh and Peter Jackson, the director himself, and his own wife. Peter loves to smuggle himself into his own movies. To be fair, I would do the same if I were a director. And for the first film, he snuck himself in pretty sneakily. Unlike the other two, where he's physically on set and on screen, you know, visible to the human eye as a person, here he is just a portrait with his own wife. In the directorial commentary for the film Battle of the Five Armies, Peter talks with Philippa Boyens, a co-screenwriter of The Lord of the Rings, how he is Bungo here, and jokingly say that he should file a complaint if he isn't credited as Bungo Baggins at the end of the film. And he technically could, because I checked IMDb and Peter Jackson is not credited as Bungo Baggins, you know, for his beautiful portray as a portrait. But then again, I think that would be kind of weird, but I don't know how credits work in Hollywood, so go, Peter Jackson, sue your own film. And as my venture to obscure director smuggling ends, so does Gandalf's relief, because Frodo speaks up and corrects that there is indeed something on the ring. We cut back to the ring between Frodo's fingers, and fine lines and markings appear on the ring. As they appear, we hear a distant whispers of a deep voice. That voice belongs to Alan Howard, a British actor who is credited as the voice of Sauron in the trilogy. and the voice we hear from the ring is basically Sauron's voice, because they are one, the ring and the Dark Lord, as Gandalf will later explain to us. On the ring's surface, we can see Frodo's somewhat faded reflection, which again is a nice little detail and didn't need to be there, but it adds to the overall life of the film. Then we turn around and see Frodo's face, and on it, the lines projected onto him as if the ring were a teleprompter and he a white wall for a coming presentation. Come to think of it, we never see the markings again in the trilogy, I believe, except at the very end when it gets destroyed. Spoilers, by the way. So is the light coming from the lines this intense that if you were to get closer, it would project onto you? The ring is like a mini flashlight with the worst output source to have. Why though? I get for a movie perspective, it's a nice little visual here to show a change from the scene before the ring was glowing and now when it does indeed glow and Frodo's face. But from a lore reason, why? Well, the one reason I can think of is simple pride. Sauron is a prideful motherfucker, and the One Ring is an extension of himself. And he wanted to dominate all life with it. So, to show off his super and awesome power, because he himself is awesome and powerful, he'd make the ring glow very brightly when he wore it, so everybody knew.
Oh shit, he wears the One Ring to rule them all, the best bling around.
Or whatever kids say these days about powerful, magical jewelry. Back in my day, we were sophisticated about these things. Frodo continues that it's some sort of elvish and that he cannot read it, which is odd because Frodo did learn elvish. It's never stated in the films, but in the books Frodo did enjoy a pretty nice education thanks to Bilbo, and that included at least the basics to elvish. But as he said, it's some form of elvish, so he can't read that variant. Gandalf confirms his confusion of the different elvish, saying that only a few can, because that is the language of Mordor and he will not speak it here. Even the walled-off Shire folk know of Dark Mordor and its evil, which makes sense. They probably use it as a warning for children if they don't behave. Go to bed, Rosalinda Sandalfoot, or the shadows of Mordor will come and get you, and then you'll have to slave away till the end of your days, and you'll miss the times you actually could go to bed. Maybe some hobbits shouldn't be parents. Gandalf translates what the inscription says, and we get the famous lines we've been waiting for. Or at least me. One ring to rule them all. One ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. I won't do the black speech translation. That we do when we get to Rivendell and Gandalf drops parts of it. Don't you worry, it's not going anywhere. The inscription is part of the poem of the rings, which I've talked about in the first episode. The reference specifically is about the One Ring and not the other 19 rings, which goes as follows, to remind us all again. One for the Dark Lord on his dark throne, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. And as Gandalf delivers his translation, we zoom in closer and closer on his face, which looks both frustrated and defeated. Understandable when the object of utter evil has been found in the home of an old friend in the possession of his little nephew, who you care deeply for. Cut. The One Ring lies on the table as Gandalf confirms that this is indeed the One Ring, and the ring looks sort of dirty. The first time in a while, really, but it looked pretty clean in Frodo's hand before. Who knows, maybe Frodo chucked it back into the fire, hoping it'll melt, and while fishing it back out again because it simply wouldn't melt, some ember and dust clung onto it. We see Gandalf sitting at a table with a pipe in his hand, smoking. Again, with the smoking. Gandalf, quit the habit, it's not good for you. I know you're an immortal being, but still. The table is wonderfully decked with mugs for tea, a can for milk, a plate with some cookies, or crackers, I believe, a bowl of fruits can be seen further away, and 5 apples just laying there on the table. Did you run out of bowls, Frodo? Frodo has a steaming teapot ready and pours it into the tea can, and as we move a little around, we see a cabinet with mugs and with similar looking designs on them. So that's probably where Frodo keeps those mugs and cans around. Nice detail, yes, and I could gush about that, but I am more impressed that the Hobbit instinct to treat everything with food and tea is much stronger than natural curiosity or fear. Did Frodo drop everything when he heard the rhyme of the ring? Oh, goodness, that screams for some tea and biscuits! Frodo, no, we must discuss— I know you like Earl Grey, I have some, and some vanilla cookies that Sam and I made yesterday. They are still good. Frodo, please.
And of course some apples. I need to get rid of them before they go bad. I can't let get food to waste.
Frodo.
Oh, I think I also have some pipeweed left from Bilbo's party.
Well, I believe little tea, wheat, biscuit setup won't harm anyone, now will it? I'm sure it went down something like that.
Gandalf explains how the ring was lost to Sauron and how Isildur had gotten it.
And here once again, a nice little trick of forced perspective is at play here.
As a hobbit, Frodo appears much smaller while Gandalf looks so much bigger than him.
At least I think it is the method of forced perspective.
It is also possible that this scene was filmed 2 separate times at 2 different sets. The scene with Frodo in a kitchen set that had normal proportions, and then a scene with Gandalf in a much smaller kitchen set to make him appear much larger.
But I think it is the forced perspective, since the table looks so even and smooth and several things cross each other here. If they use separate sets, that might have caused small errors, like an apple turned the wrong way or a bowl slightly tilted the wrong angle.
Frodo is to the left of the screen and Gandalf is on the right, similar to when Gandalf arrived on the cart. Though appearing right next to each other, it's possible that Frodo is much further away than we actually perceive.
Like I said, forced perspective.
Then we cut to Frodo's worried face holding his mug as he concludes that Bilbo then found the ring in Gollum's cave.
And goodness, Elijah Wood is so pretty. Look at those. Those eyes are criminal, are they not? Is it just me? Maybe it's just me.
We see the ring once again from Frodo's perspective, and now it's squeaky clean again.
Lovely, so it also has self-cleaning powers. Quite convenient. That makes absolute sense. Who was in charge of continuity errors? I have found another one. Officers, take him.
Gandalf side-eyes the ring as he explains that the ring had been in Bilbo's keeping for 60 years and that it was prolonging his life, keeping the aging at a minimum, but that is now no more.
And Frodo remains perpetually terrified and worried.
Understandable. What Gandalf is saying is that Bilbo will probably age rapidly now, and maybe even die before he gets to see him again. At least, that's what I would think if my old wizard friend would drop such a bombshell of news to me.
The wizard continues that the evil is stirring in Mordor, and the ring had heard its master's call, to which Frodo counters that Sauron was destroyed. Right? And then, like on cue, we hear the familiar whispers we have heard before when the fine lines had appeared on the ring, and both Frodo and Gandalf look very surprised. Why the ring does this, I have no idea. My best guess is that it reacted to the name Sauron, almost shouted by Frodo. Like a puppy reacting to its name, or its master's name in that case. Well, in that case, they're kind of the same, right?
We see the ring again, and it's the same frame as before, where it has some dirt on it.
Well, good to know that even the one ring has a nice and a bad angle for beauty shots. Don't worry, darling, we will get you from your most pristine and clean side.
Gandalf destroys Frodo's little speck of hope and optimism with a simple "no," explaining that the spirit of Sauron endured.
I love the word endured. It's so much better than survived.
I can really picture someone or something really having to work and put all the energy to the test to overcome something. In Sauron's case it was, well, death. And though heavily weakened and physically destroyed, he endured the pain and hardship of all that.
Almost inspirational. You know, if it weren't the Dark Lord of the land where the shadows lie, who could put the world into another dark age if he wanted to.
Gandalf then explains that the life force of Sauron is bound to the ring, and since the ring survived, well, Sauron did too, and now
he's returned. Well, shit. What one little throw into the fiery pits from whence it came would have prevented. But alas, here we are, aren't we, Isildur? I can't be too hard on the guy. He did lose, after all, both father and brother and a good deal of friends during the battle against Sauron, and the ring inside the forge is pretty much unbeatable in terms of mental strength, so you get a pass, Isildur.
Gandalf continues that the orcs of Sauron have multiplied and that his fortress of Barad-dûr has been rebuilt, which we've seen in the last episode.
Though I do wonder how Gandalf figured that one out. We never saw him study Mordor news, only Gondorian history.
But in the film, the passing of time is pretty vague for a more cohesive story, while in the books, like I said before,
17 bloody years had passed. I imagine it's an easy thing to learn that the main stronghold of your main bad guy was rebuilt in the past 3,000 years. Also, 3,000 years? That's a long time. Christianity doesn't even exist that long and it has a massive influence on us.
Gandalf explains that Sauron only needs this ring to regain his complete strength again, and that he seeks it all the time. All his thoughts are bent on it, and vice versa. The ring also seeks its master and tries everything in its power to return to Sauron. They are one, the ring and the Dark Lord. And we cut to Gandalf's perspective and look onto the ring from the other side of the table. Here too, it is clean and pristine. Lovely. We zoom in closer on the object of doom as the strings of the One Ring theme come in. Gandalf then finished his sentence with what sounds like a plea that Sauron must never find it, and his eyes are so full of worry, fear, and despair. Quickly it is picked up by Frodo, who goes, "All right, we hide it, and never speak of this again," leaving the kitchen already looking for a good hiding place. He surely claims that no one knows that the ring is here, and thus they don't have to worry about it being found since only they know it is here, right? But when Gandalf doesn't speak and only follows Frodo in silence, and even though he isn't focused, we can see the defeated expression on him. Frodo gets nervous and goes from his assured fact that no one knows where the ring is to a shy and uncertain, "Do they, Gandalf?" Gandalf, defeated, says that one other knew of Bilbo and the ring. Gollum. He was looking for him, but the enemy had found him first. As I already talked about last episode, Gollum was drawn to Mordor due to the imprint the ring had left on him, and it was due to that imprint that the Nazgul had him imprisoned and tortured. And we cut to a lovely scene of torture right now. Yay! It is a horrible large steel and wood apparatus with smoke and chains. It looks like a more metal version of the torture device, the rack, where one would be bound by ankles and wrists and slowly pulled apart. And by pulled apart I mean so much that you would lose your limbs and die. But there's also a lot of steam hissing around Gollum, and his wrists seem to be free of any chains here. But it must be something that is working with the turning of a wheel, or something, because I hear the groaning of wood when it's put under more pressure. So maybe it was something like the rack, but right above some hot pit. Mordor has enough lava to fill that for sure. So maybe Gollum was tied to the rack around his stomach and legs, and a wheel would open a valve that would let out more lava that would get closer and closer to his back. So it's probably something like the rack suspended over a hot pit that just adds to the torture of being ripped apart. Lovely. In the books, it's a little different, because of course it is. Sauron himself interrogates Gollum and tortured him to find out where the ring was. How he did that is not entirely clear. Generally, it is assumed that Sauron's touch alone was as hot as fire, and that would be enough to make anyone confess. Remember, Sauron is a fire Maya, an elemental spirit of fire, so, that would check out. Yikes. Yeah, you know what, I'm glad we have this partially obscured rack scene. Otherwise, the age rating would have shot up pretty high if we've seen burnt and melted skin. When Frodo hears that Gollum revealed the terms Shire and Baggins, he begins to realize that this would lead the dark forces of Mordor right to his doorstep. The music swirls high and we cut to a foggy road with two black riders emerging in slow motion as if they were ethereal beings from another time. Because they kind of are. The strings keep going faster and we cut to a man holding a lantern. Behind him, on the right, we see a post made out of wood which has several posts of parchment up and a small hobbit hole behind that. He wears a black top hat, dark gloves and a thick jacket to shield him against the cold, even though I said earlier it might be late summer. I always wondered who that character was because we only ever see him here and afterwards, well, never again. He's never even mentioned after this scene. Now, this is a bounder, the equivalent of a sheriff in the Shire. They were called Shirrifs, and they were the sole law enforcement officials in the Shire. The word sheriff itself is an older version of sheriff. The Shirrifs had something called the Watch, which was essentially a group of hobbits that would make sure that there was peace in the Shire, among hobbits, and that no one would come in with the intent of harm. Similar to a little police force. This sheriff does not have a name, but his actor does. Sir Ian Mune. Ooh, fancy, we have another sir here. Good to know Ian was in good company. Ooh, the knighting was actually pretty recent, during 2024's New Year Honours of New Zealand. Oh, you're right. I sometimes forget that the UK monarchy is still, king over some of their colonies. Goodness. He was born in 1941, was both actor and second unit director in this film. Also, not so funny fun fact, he and other 14 actors filed a lawsuit against New Line Cinema over merchandising royalties. Fun. The action was settled out of court. Yay. And as a sheriff, Ian Mune does his bounder duty in asking who is coming and why do they want to pass. We cut to the Black Rider swinging with his sword and see the wide open mouth of the sheriff. The music swells more and more and... oh, what a cliffhanger! What is going to happen? Did he swallow a fly? Did a Nazgul flash his ankle? Well, those questions will have to wait, because this is the end of this episode, because we have reached the 5-minute mark, and I hope you enjoyed. Well, I am happy to see that I was able to squeeze some interesting facts out, not going to lie. I was somewhat worried to have little to talk about this time, but I should know by now that I will always find something to talk about. In that sense, I'm just as bad as Ted Sandyman. At this point, I would like to thank everybody who ever added or updated sites like the Lord of the Rings Wiki and IMDb. Without those sources to fact-check and reassure certain things, I could never do this little project of mine. So truly, thank you all. I hope you have some good coming days whenever you listen to this, and that you learned some new things or were able to enjoy the ramblings of a friend in the background. I will see you in the next episode of The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring podcast. Take care.